when we're about 12 years old, because the adults are sort of living in denial of the human condition and have learnt to do that, adolescents start seeing the imperfection of life around them and start wrestling with that and thinking deeply about it. And they soon realise that for some reason adults don't want to talk about it, so they're left on their own. So at about 12, they actually start trying to sort of understand. At 9, so around 12, when they go to senior school, they start this search for trying to understand the human condition, the imperfection of human life begins, and it deepens. So they keep thinking about it. They've learnt that the adult world doesn't want to talk about it, won't even, and everyone's sort of pretending everything's fine, and they can see quite clearly it isn't. So by the time they get about 14 or 15, something serious starts to happen. They start to discover the human condition within themselves, the imperfections within themselves, that there's those angers and meanness and selfishness and indifference to others. And they're still thinking completely honestly. They're still facing the issue of the human condition. So when it actually deepens, they hit this crisis point in there, normally around 15 or so, when they finally discover the human condition within. They're trying to face that down, and it's suicidally depressing trying to try to confront it without an understanding of it. And so so they go into this crisis that I've called resignation, when they resign to thereafter living in denial of the human condition. They go on become an escapist, a superficial life. They never want to go near that dark corner again. So it's very rare to find any description of a kid going through this, because the adult world, as I said, have already resigned, so they don't want to listen. But there are some marvellous descriptions of children going through resignation. This is probably one of the best. It's from American Pulitzer Prize-winning child psychologist Robert Coles, and he describes this encounter he had with a child going through this crisis point in resignation, and I think everyone will be able to relate to this. I tell of the loneliness many young people feel. It's a loneliness that has to do with self-imposed judgment of sorts. I remember a young man of 15 who engaged in light banter, only to shut down, shake his head, refuse to talk at all when his own life and troubles became the subject at hand. He had stopped going to school. He sat in his room for hours listening to rock music. The doors closed. I asked him about his head-shaking behaviour. I wondered whom he was thereby addressing. He replied, no one. I hesitated, gulped a bit, and took a chance. Not yourself. He looked right at me now in a sustained stare for the first time. Why do you say that? He asked. I decided not to answer the question in the manner in which I was trained, basically as an adult, to deny the issue of the human condition. Instead, with some unease, I heard myself saying, I've been there. I remember being there. Remember when I felt I couldn't say a word to anybody. The young man kept staring at me, didn't speak. When he took out his handkerchief and wiped his eyes, I realised they had begun to fill. Now, obviously, what had happened is the boy was in tears because Coles had reached him with some recognition and appreciation of what he was wrestling with. I mean, Coles had shown some honesty about what the boy could see and was struggling with, namely the horror of the hypocrisy of human behaviour, including his own behaviour. So that's a marvellous little capturing of this moment. And the child is in his own room, he's immersed, lost in himself, he can't relate to the world world's not acknowledging what he's wrestling with. He's dying a million deaths inside himself, and there's lots of other descriptions of going through this tight corner. So there's a lot more about the process of resignation that children go through, but what the essence of it is that it reveals just how terrifying the issue of the human condition really is, because these children are actually trying to face it down and can't. It's just leading to suicidal depression. And they have to jump off this cliff, resign themselves to living in denial of the human condition and never go near it again. So the problem my book's got is when it brings that back into contact with that, they tend to be psychologically don't want to go near it.
That resonates with me. I was that young man. I locked myself in my room listening to music of alienation, and at the same time reading everything I could get my hands on, in the belief that if I just found out why nobody's talking about this, then I will be able to understand it. So yeah, that absolutely resonates with me. Listening to music and reading, locked in my room for a couple of years as an early teenager, it was a very real thing.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people can remember that, and that's so precious to, that's the benefit of using the resignation explanation, because people can actually remember going through it, and once they know that they've been through it, then they've got that anchor to know, it was a terrifying subject.
It's a life-changing experience. It really is. Certainly was for me. Yeah.
That's what happens when you tell them about resignation. It helps, because then people are connected then for the first time for a long time in their life to that experience.
Well, I wished I'd known then what I know now.